Chapter 23. At the break of dawn, Amanda left with Basil to make the final preparations for the trip to the canyon. James had gone ahead of them the night before to secure a military plane with help from the committee. Now that Amanda would either be cured or killed by the Ascendants, the onus was no longer on the committee to deal with her problem. Apparently, they had decided that it was now okay to help. Preparations complete, Amanda and Basil returned to the house to collect Alan and to say their goodbyes. "Alan, please hurry," Basil said as the chauffeur opened the back door of his Rolls-Royce. But Alan might as well have been in another dimension. He seemed immobilized by desire, hungrily running his eyes over Amanda as she said goodbye to Matt and Lydia on the porch. Amanda appreciated that Alan had noticed how stunning she looked in her olive-toned front-zip designer jumpsuit. James never seemed to notice much about her. That is, until she locked herself in a room with Proctor, and then suddenly there he was, banging on the door, all jealous. Men. Who could possibly understand them? She hugged Lydia, then Matt. "Take care, guys. I hope to see you soon." Lydia swallowed hard, searching her face. "I know you, Mandy, and I know your heart. You will be fine. Please, please text me as soon as it's over." She hugged her one more time and whispered so only Amanda could hear. "You need to be careful of Alan." Amanda pulled out of the hug. "Huh?" Lydia hugged her back, then whispered again. "He's dangerous, Mandy. I don't want to get into it now. I just want you to go and get well. But just promise me you'll be careful about trusting him, okay?" "Okay, fine." What else was she going to say? Lydia had probably discovered Alan's occupation, and like everyone else, didn't think it was a good idea to hang out with an assassin. Probably. Amanda worked to push her trepidation aside and climbed in next to Basil. As they drove, she still mulled over her friend's words. In the end, she decided to trust her own feelings. What else could she do? And try as she might, she could not feel any danger from Alan. She'd seen inside his heart. "Did you know the Sycamore Canyon is the second largest canyon in Arizona?" James asked. They were now comfortably seated in the plane. James looked confident and natural in the pilot's seat. "It's 56,000 acres of wilderness. No paved roads, no campgrounds, just sand, mountains, and trees, maybe a hiker or two." "Yes," Basil mused. "About as remote a place as it can be." He sat back and crossed his arms, lost in thought. Amanda spent most of the plane ride taking in the scenery. As they closed in on their destination, the landscape shifted, the ponderosa pines giving way to open spaces and rust-colored mountain ranges. James masterfully navigated the black Pilatus PC-12 plane through clouds and around soaring pinnacles. The cliffs were colorful and sliced with deep gorges. It was a rough and wild place, abandoned to nature. "Okay, I see it," signaled James. "That's it? That barely looks like a runway," Amanda said, staring down at the battered path ahead. "We're going to land soon. Get ready." He'd probably landed planes in much worse conditions. She had to admit that his confidence and calm was sexy. Yet, as much as she trusted his skills, she couldn't help a little gasp when the wheels of the plane touched down. "We're good, Amanda. We're good," he reassured her, darting her a look. He was keeping everything safe and under control. She liked that. Once the plane had immobilized, James, Amanda, Alan, and Basil climbed out onto the cracked concrete. The air was warm and dry, blowing fine sand and tumbleweeds across the runway. As she looked around, Amanda's hair flew into her face. She swatted it back. The base was definitely abandoned. A mustard-colored concrete bunker squatted in the distance, with some birds hovering above it. Everything was eerily quiet. James eyed Alan and asked, "Do you even own anything besides suits, pal?" "I can strip if you like," Alan replied grimly. Amanda and Basil traded a glance, but tried to ignore the tension between the men. James shook his head and strode ahead toward the bunker, but Amanda froze. "Hush!" She realized she was receiving a message, though she couldn't quite make it out. She wasn't hearing it, she was feeling it. The message came in the form of an emotion, a raw idea that wasn't associated with words. She extended her palm toward the bunker, her energy a clear match to the feeling emanating from it. The ascendants were beckoning. "I can feel them," she said, narrowing her eyes. "They're in the bunker. Let's go, guys. This thing in my head might blow up any minute." "I feel them too," James remarked. "They are very powerful." "They're trying to send me a message," she said in a faint whisper, barely moving her lips. Not waiting for the others, she hurried forward. When they neared the bunker door, Basil stopped. His hand went up to his chest and clutched at his shirt. He was hyperventilating. "I can't come any closer. They are too powerful. They are doing me harm, I can tell." Amanda didn't want to see him harmed. "Go back to the plane, Basil. You don't look well." She hugged him and tried to smile, but the effect of this unknown force on him scared her. "See you soon." Behind his rimless glasses, her advisor's eyes were attentive. "My dear girl, you will be fine. Yes, they are strong, but not evil. Much like radiation, their power is deadly if not handled properly. I have to go." He nodded to the men and hurried back to the plane. Amanda watched him get to safety, then turned her attention back to the door. Alan pulled at the handle. "It's locked." "Not for long. Step aside." James extended his arm, and the heavily bolted doors rattled and flew open. They peered into an empty room with concrete walls. There didn't seem to be any danger as they entered. Then Amanda shrieked and stopped dead in her tracks. A familiar, severe pain started in her head. "Guys, it's starting again. Oh my God. Please, no. Not yet." Everything was spinning, while burning pain sizzled through her brain. Both men grabbed at her, but she could hardly feel them. Nobody could help her now. And then she sensed it again, the message from the Ascendants, a message that came to her not through words, but through an essence. The spinning stabilized, and through the haze she saw flickering silhouettes in the wall ahead. It was as if the wall had become porous, showing her a glimpse of the other side. It was time. "Stay here. I see them," she told the guys. "They're waiting for me." Silently, stumbling and swaying, Amanda walked toward the wall at the opposite end of the room. Just before she reached it, a lightning ball flew out of it and was at her side in an instant. It sizzled and hovered, rapidly growing to encompass her in her entirety. She heard Alan cry out in alarm, but it didn't matter. A portal opened inside the lightning ball, and without hesitation, she went through it. Chapter 24. For what seemed like several minutes, she was between worlds. She was a part of the lightning, but she could also make out images and sounds from the bunker where she had left the men. Judging from their body language, things weren't going well. They were squared off to each other, fists clenched. But she wouldn't be any help to the situation until she got better. She had to take care of herself before she could worry about anyone else. And then the world of the bunker was gone. She stepped out into another reality. Her dizziness stopped, and she felt at peace. It was a deadly calm, like in the eye of a hurricane. All around her the world was ceaselessly shifting and merging. At first it appeared she was in some sort of a cave, yet she soon realized it was something else, something between the physical world and another dimension. Rolling walls of cloud-like formations surrounded her, merging into the stone, rising to an incredible height. Looking up, Amanda saw that the cave opened up to a dark, mystical sky, and the rolling walls formed rows in a gigantic, majestic amphitheater. Strange figures loomed ahead of her, vaguely human. Iridescent, then growing dark, then growing white, then back to their rainbow shimmer. In long robes, their silhouettes flickered and undulated as they drifted in and out of this dimension. They were the surreal figures of the tarot. There were 6 of them at first, then 3 disappeared. After what seemed like a moment of contemplation, one of the remaining figures spoke. "This penitent looks very strange indeed." It did not speak out loud. The words were more like a whisper, more like a thought that had delicately etched into Amanda's consciousness. "We have not seen a penitent in a very long time." Then came a haughty retort. "Silence, fool, your foolish banter displeases us." "Yes, Empress," the first voice replied, as if bowing down to her authority. "This one is far gone," the Empress declared. "Dead within minutes she'd be, had she not come to us." "Come closer," the third figure urged, her long limbs slowly flickering into position as she appeared to open her arms. "I am the High Priestess, and I shall read your heart." She shimmered in all colors of the rainbow as Amanda advanced, stopping a few feet away. The figure had no face, yet it exuded a steady, powerful presence that felt human enough. A peculiar peace took over Amanda, numbing her senses. Nothing mattered anymore. It was as if a wool blanket had wrapped itself around her heart and her soul, anesthetizing her fears, her thoughts, and her desires, while she stood before the ancient judges. She could have died right there, content and comfortable. "I can feel your courage most of all. You are a warrior. Amanda, that is your name, the one worthy of love. Your heart is a phoenix, a fiery ball of courage and love, reborn onto oneself. Worthy of love you are, and worthy of life. You shall live, my lovely." The anesthetizing effects immediately dissipated, and suddenly she could feel again. She could think again, instead of merely registering what went on around her. All the anxiety and the fear left her. She would live. Tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered, "So there's no evil in my heart?" The figures glided away as if they were in a telescoping tunnel. "Don't be a fool, Amanda," the Empress replied. "You did kill, but it was not the real you that did it. It was your shadow self. All humans have one. The overload makes one lose all control over the shadow self. As in a dream, there is nothing you could have done differently. We judge the sentinels on their choices. We judge the sentinels on their hearts. The shadow self is beyond anyone's reach." At the end of the tunnel, the 3 ascendants came together and fused into one luminous shape. "Hold on, Amanda. You have nothing to fear." Chapter 25. As a ball of lightning enveloped Amanda once again, a soft yellow glow encircled her, an unfurling wall of light. She could not tell up from down. The glow cocooned her, cradled her, seeped into her mind. She reached out to grab onto something to balance herself, but the glow was empty, surreal. It was full of soundless sparks that snapped at her skin, but she could feel no sensation from them, not even warmth. A wall appeared before her, and she began speeding toward it. Terrified she might crash, she shielded her face with her arms. But as she peeked through her fingers, the wall seemed to dissipate. All movement stopped, as if she were suspended outside of time and space. She could see something looming ahead of her, getting closer. 2 men, Alan and James. They were still facing each other. Amanda blinked a few times. Her vision was unfocused, as if she were looking through a foggy glass. She even rubbed her eyes. Then she heard their voices, as if coming from a different room. "Are you in love with her?" James asked that. Amanda's heart began pounding, and she listened intently. "What business is it of yours, Purple Heart?" Alan replied coldly. "It is my business because she's my partner, and I'm looking out for her." James set his jaw and narrowed his eyes. "And she shouldn't have anything to do with a dirty killer like you. Stay away from her. I'm warning you." Amanda saw Alan's lips moving, but she couldn't make out what he replied. It must have been quite something, though, because in one swift move James pulled out his firearm and aimed it at Alan, who nearly matched his efficiency when he pulled out 2 handguns of his own. "Oh, is that how you feel, handsome?" Alan suddenly betrayed his jealous rage. "That quite settles it then, doesn't it? Mr. Purple Heart, military pilot, so rugged and manly, you must have crowds of women camping around your house." James appeared unmoved. "This isn't about me. You're bad news. If you actually care about her, you'll leave her alone." "It's not about you? Sure, of course not." Alan made a visible effort to collect himself and settled his lips into a smirk. He pulled his arms apart, revealing his chest. "Come on. You're not going to shoot me in cold blood, are you, Purple Heart? You've never shot anyone in cold blood in your life." Amanda lost sight of them. She gasped in fear and frustration, her hand instinctively reaching out to the concrete wall now back in place in front of her. What was wrong with these two? How long was her transition going to take? In the distance, she heard an unexpected sound, something like firecrackers, before the wall brightened and afforded her another glimpse. Alan's right arm was extended toward the door, while his left arm stayed low, still holding his second gun. Amanda gulped down her fears. She couldn't see James. Within seconds, the glow dissipated for good, and she was back. She finally felt well, liberated in her body and in her mind, until she saw that James was on the ground, holding his leg, grunting in pain. Then she saw a third party, a dead body near the door, a semi-automatic weapon beside it. Alan saw her and hurried over. "It worked? They cured you?" he asked, anxiously searching her face as he tucked a gun back into his jacket. "Yeah, I'm fine. But what the hell happened here?" Blinking in disbelief, Amanda kneeled at James's side. "I'll be fine," James said, pushing himself onto his elbows. Blood rushed out of his left thigh. He had been shot. "Give me your shirt, quick!" She frantically motioned to Alan. "Fine." He started taking off his shirt, but he wasn't exactly rushing either. She could have slapped him. She pressed her hands over James's as they both struggled to contain his bleeding. "There you go," Alan said quietly, finally handing her his shirt. Amanda made a tourniquet around James's leg. When she got the bleeding under control, she turned to Alan. He just stood there, detached, inscrutable, having thrown his suit jacket back on. "Did you do this, Alan?" "What?" As if waking up, he now seemed taken aback by her intensity. "No, I wouldn't shoot him. I can't fly that plane. Neither can you or Basil, so we need him alive and well." "He's dangerous, Mandy." Lydia's words echoed in her mind, and she gave Alan a look. "We were waiting for you when out of nowhere that guy forced his way in here and started shooting. He hit Purple Heart, and I took him out." "Be careful about trusting him." She looked at James. "Is that true?" James grimaced. "That's part of the story, sure." "That's the part that matters right now," Alan fired back. "Right," James said. She glanced at the corpse by the door, a bullet hole clean through the forehead. If Alan wanted James dead, he would be dead. "How did that creep get here?" she asked, nodding to the body. "He must have been hiding in our cargo bay," James answered. "My guess is that Proctor hired him, showed him in, and timed an altercation to enable him to kill me." "That's insane," Alan scoffed. "Besides, I don't even think there is a cargo bay on your plane." "I think I know more about planes than you do," James shot back. Something was definitely off here. "Did you do this, Alan? How could you? Why would you?" Nearly hysterical, she struggled to think clearly. She'd been through too much in one day. "I did not," Alan said earnestly. He came toward her, but she held up her hand to forestall him. Just leave me alone. I need a minute. I don't know what to think. She sat back on her heels. We need to help James into the plane. And where's Basil? Her eyes widened in sudden horror at the thought that something may have happened to him, that the assassin might have gotten to him before charging into the bunker. Basil is still with the plane, James said. He nodded in Alan's direction. He's not lying. He didn't actually shoot me, although he probably wanted to. His snarky tone convinced her he was right. Alan had wanted to shoot James, and James probably wanted to shoot Alan. Men. But that didn't matter right now. Help me get him up, she asked Alan. When James protested, she said, James, please, enough. I can't handle your weight without him. James finally relented, and together Amanda and Alan managed to lift the pilot to his feet. He leaned on them, and they stumbled out into the sunlight, moving as quickly as possible. With every step Amanda took, she was filled with horror at the uncertainty of what awaited them in the cockpit. Her overload abilities were completely gone. She couldn't see Basil, couldn't feel him. He could be dead. When they neared the plane, Amanda saw Basil Blake's limp form slouched over the seat. She felt like dropping James, jumping over to Basil's side, and unleashing a shockwave of despair, but she fought to keep calm. He might not be dead. He might just be injured. Hold on, I'll check on him. Alan's tone was earnest and firm. He helped her settle James against the plane before leaping into the cockpit. It's okay, he's fine, he called out. He's just been knocked unconscious, but his pulse is strong, and he's breathing normally. Amanda started sobbing, her emotions finally taking over. She slumped next to James on the concrete of the old runway and couldn't stop crying. Then James dropped like a rag doll. Blood started pooling under his leg. This was a nightmare. Just when she felt like she'd been saved, she had dropped into yet another nightmare. Amanda stared at the blood that slowly settled into the little cracks in the concrete. She should be doing something. She should bandage his wound better. We need to go, Alan said. He needs urgent medical care. Come on, let's pull him up. Together they pulled James back into a sitting position. His eyelids stirred, then opened. Amanda regrouped as he regained consciousness. She would stay strong. Without a word, she tightened his tourniquet, and the bleeding stopped again. Get me into the cockpit, James said. We have to get out of here before more assassins show up. As cautiously as possible, they dragged him in and helped him into his seat. Can you really do this, James? Amanda asked. What if you pass out again? He gave a few brief nods. I got this. Okay, let's go then. She and Alan climbed into their seats. She thought about James's Purple Heart, earned for taking a hit in combat. He must have been through worse battles than this one. Of course he could get them to safety. But as she watched him prepare for takeoff, he appeared to be in a lot of pain, both physical and mental. What kind of memories did being shot bring back for him? Had Charlene also been in the Air Force? Had he lost her in combat? So many unanswered questions. She was almost relieved that Basil, the super empath, was out cold now, because the pain in that cockpit would have been too much for the old man to absorb. Basil came to about halfway during the flight. What happened? He asked. She told him the ascendants had helped her, that she was cured from the overload. When he asked about James's leg wound, Alan said, An assassin attacked us while Amanda was being healed. He shot James, then I took him out. That's all. An assassin? Basil pondered, his confusion evident. But who would have sent him, and why? My guess is that Proctor here had him smuggled into the plane. Right, Alan shot back. The plane that you procured. I find it unlikely that another person could have been hiding out on this plane with us, Basil said. Good point. Amanda couldn't help but think that Christina Abigail was behind the attack in some way. Yet it made little sense for her to double-cross them. Was the committee still against them? Why didn't he kill me? Basil wondered aloud. He had every chance. They were all quiet as the question hung in the air. Within a few hours, James landed the plane safely at a military base near Boston. What happened next was a blur of flashing lights and action as Amanda jumped out to meet the ambulance. She rode with James to the hospital, where he was taken in for immediate surgery. Basil was examined and given a clean bill of health. Once she knew everyone was in the clear, Amanda took a taxi from the hospital to the train station, where her car was still parked. She drove back to her apartment, immensely relieved that the ordeal was behind her. Exhausted, she took a deliciously soothing shower and climbed into a freshly made bed. She toyed with the memory of Alan's kiss before falling into a dreamless sleep. Chapter 26. Early the next morning, Amanda texted Lydia and Matt to let them know what had happened. Lydia responded quickly. "I'm so happy everything worked out. So do you have a minute for me later today?" "Sure, what's up?" "I need to speak to you about Alan. It won't take long, and it's pretty important." "Can't you just tell me now?" "Better we just speak in person, okay? Too hard to explain otherwise. Meet me at the spa around 11? "Okay." She started feeling unhinged again. What did Lydia need to say about Alan? But worrying about it was pointless. So she got out of bed, carefully selected an outfit, a cream-colored cashmere dress with a chocolate suede jacket, and dressed. She applied makeup, including a new shade of maroon lipstick she'd been dying to try, and headed to the hospital to visit James. Before going to his room, she stopped at the gift shop, where her eyes fell upon a charming arrangement of red tulips. She took the vase to the register and paid, then headed upstairs. She walked into his room and placed the flowers on the table beside him. "You like tulips?" "I'm a dude, I don't have a preference." He smiled at her, yet she couldn't believe how bad he looked post-surgery. His leg was in a cast, and his bare chest was covered in bruises. "Oh, God," she said when she noticed them. "How did this man fly them safely across the country with all these injuries?" "I have bruised lungs and broken ribs to go along with the broken leg," he said. "I'll be here for a while." She pulled a chair over to his bedside. He had to be in some pain. It seemed best to try and distract him. "I grew up with tulips," she told him. "They were my mom's favorite flower." She wondered for a moment why, of all things, she would bring up her parents right now. "You don't really talk about your parents," he said, as if to echo her thoughts. She started to ramble in spite of herself. "My mom was a model and then a photographer. Anyway, she always told me that models are like tulips. The most important part is their head." James laughed, and she relaxed, laughing along with him. "I can't believe I remember that." "What else do you remember?" "Oh, lots." She didn't like where this conversation was heading, despite the fact that she had instigated it. She turned the focus back on him. "How are you doing?" "I've been better," he said. "I've also been worse, so I'm fine." He was so strong, emotionally and physically. She could feel the old draw pulling her to him again. She dropped her gaze to her knees and fiddled with her hands. "Well, it turns out I've worked with your surgeon before," she said, trying to regain her composure. "Yesterday I told him he has to make you as good as new, otherwise the U.S. Air Force would have to close shop." He stared at her, and she could barely catch her breath. "What?" "You look happy," he said, smiling. "Radiant." She dipped her eyes to his chest and back. "Thanks. Yeah, it's good to be alive. What about you? You said you're good? That chest looks like it hurts." He stretched a little. "I'm good, Amanda. I'm good. So tell me, what are you up to today? Plasmid hunting?" She looked away. "I'm meeting a friend at the spa, and then we might head to lunch," she lied. "I could really use a manicure and a mud treatment, maybe a therapeutic bath, too." It wasn't all a lie. She was planning on meeting Lydia at the spa, and there was, in fact, a lunch planned with a friend. Alan was that friend. He had asked her to lunch the night before, and she'd agreed. but she wasn't about to tell James that. "That sounds nice. My Saturday is all mapped out as well," he said, and winked. Then he reached out for her hand resting at the edge of his mattress. "So when they do these nails of yours," he carefully lifted each finger in turn, "do they feel the sparks?" His eyes lifted to her lips and back down again. Amanda froze completely, shy yet excited. Was he just commenting on her sentinel powers, or was he insinuating there were sparks between them? Was James actually flirting? The moment was interrupted when the door opened. Two young men paused at the threshold, seemingly surprised to see her there. But their hesitation was brief. They barged right in, followed by an older man in a military uniform. James introduced them as his buddies from the Air Force and his superior officer. They began talking excitedly, and Amanda was suddenly uncomfortable. "I can head out now." She started to gather her things. James reached for her hand, but she shrugged in the direction of his visitors. He looked alarmed. "Give us a minute, guys." The men obliged, heading out into the hall. "You're not leaving already?" he asked her, with a bit more intensity than she was comfortable with. As if sensing it, he switched his tone to levity. "I'll kick these clowns out. I can catch up with them anytime." I actually sort of have to go so I don't miss my appointment. Can I give you a call later?" "Sure, anytime. I want a therapeutic bath, too." It was adorable how awkward he acted about making such a forward suggestion. She had to laugh. On an impulse, she bent over to kiss him on the cheek, her hair brushing his chest. "Did I say thank you enough times for saving our lives? You are amazing, absolutely amazing." He suddenly looked so serious and so handsome. He reached for her face, but his hand stopped midway, hesitating. Instead, he just took her hand again and gave it a light squeeze. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "I'll try," she said. "Now get some rest, okay?" "Sure. See you tomorrow." She thought she heard him add, "See you tomorrow, beautiful." But of course there was no way closed-off, unattainable James would ever call her that, so she just dismissed it. As she passed his friends on her way out, they all muttered greetings to her, then noisily barged back into James's room again. As Amanda headed toward the elevator bank, she heard the guys compliment James on how hot his girlfriend was. She smiled. A week ago, she'd have been thrilled to have him show interest, but her feelings had become too complicated at this point. And in her view, James still seemed unsure of his own feelings toward her. She'd think about it some more, in the comfort of her therapeutic bath.